Well, thank you all for joining us again for our 10th episode of Freerun. And for those who've been here all 10 times, thank you for your loyal following. And that goes to my two co-hosts, Mike Laszlo and Dustin Wilson.
Thank you, sir.
And we're here for a Tuesday edition of Freerun. We had Memorial Day weekend and wanted to, a lot of people out trying to make the most of a quarantine or social distance Memorial Day weekend. And I know, Mike, you took the show on the road.
I did take the show on the road. We did a road trip, quarantine road trip, up through Wyoming into South Dakota. Shockingly, it's only a 5.5 hour drive to Mount Rushmore from Denver. And so took the kids up there. I will admit that we did stay at a hotel, did a little research on that one, but not enough. Did not feel good about being there. It was dirty. It was a Marriott property, and so I was pretty shocked. So we cut the trip short, actually. We were just very uncomfortable. And I hadn't really been out too much during quarantine. And so other than just back and forth to my office, which is very small and just me and my father. So being there was just uncomfortable. Lots of dogs, lots of people. So we left. I'll just be honest.
And you went out to eat as well, correct?
We did go out to eat.
Experience?
It was not great. I didn't enjoy it. But I would say this: the restaurant was clean, and they were wearing masks, gloves. I felt like all the menus were paper disposable, and single-use plastics on the table. So I definitely felt like the restaurant was trying, but I also felt like they were confused. And I don't mean like outwardly like bumping into walls confused, but just timid around the guests and not necessarily knowing like. I had napkins at one point for my kids and I wanted to throw them away. And he said, the waiter said, I'll take them. And I said, no, I'll just tell me where the trash can is. And I felt like an idiot, but I couldn't have him touching it. And so the whole thing was just like a cluster. Mm-hmm. And I just said to myself, I think it's going to be a while before I go to eat again anywhere else. And I think they tried their best, but it just wasn't, it was not an enjoyable experience. So I don't know what it's going to be like come today.
We're all living in our own little bubble in this sense. And I think as you start to see different cities popping up, and some of our hosts have spoken about it, that our expectations are sort of conditioned to the environment we're in. But then as you step outside of it and you're in another area where it's different than you are on day to day, that really kind of changes things up a little bit. And you're never really sure what you're going to get. And when you get out there, it's like, oh, it's a strange new world for you.
It was like anxious. I think everybody was anxious, but in a way that you appreciated, because I would say I didn't see anything where it was like flippant or outwardly rejecting the standards. I think people did try to stay away or to social distance. They did try to show that they were wearing the masks. We were very surprised to learn when we got to Mount Rushmore, actually, that it was open. And we expected, we had checked the website and was told that it was no services were going to be available. And it was just going to be walk up, look, you can walk around the trails, but that's going to be it. But it was fully operational. And I would say I was very impressed with that. The food court was completely closed, but they had, the ice cream and coffee shop open. And again, what I noticed was, even though it was slow, and I'm not a patient man, it was painfully slow, but I could tell they really were trying to change gloves after every ice cream service, after every coffee service, go slow, wipe things down. It was impressive that they were trying. And so, but again, it was not an experience that I really enjoyed as a customer. I appreciated what they were doing, but I'll appreciate it while in my mind, I'll just stay at home and not go out for that experience again.
I'm going to do an awkward interruption here where I'm going to press mute and let you guys run with it while I let an AC guy in, and I'll be right back.
He showed up, all right. But yeah, it was interesting, Dustin. Go ahead.
Well, I imagine particularly in the restaurant, in that environment, it kind of builds a lot of unnecessary anxiety that you might not normally, experience. It just kind of makes the whole feeling of being there more uncomfortable. In my mind, that's what I kind of, if I imagine myself going out to a restaurant, I get kind of nervous to touch anything, or nervous if people are coming over to the table, just kind of nervous all around. And it's, you can only kind of handle that nervous energy for so long before you just want to kind of leave.
Yeah, it was odd. And like I said, we got to the restaurant, it was at 50% capacity, even though they didn't like say, hey, we're at 50% capacity, but you went in, you put your name in, they took your phone number, and then you stood in the parking lot by your car and waited for them to call you and let you know that your reservation was ready. And this was just like like a nicer burger joint, probably like a BW at Threes or something like that. And so it wasn't like high class dining, but they went to a complete monitored setup where you'd come in, they'd sit you down. All the stools were gone from the bars. And of course, I'm trying to think about it like, okay, what am I seeing here? What can I talk about here on the show, or what can I take for other clients? But it was 2 seconds before I just forgot about that and just was a pure consumer, engaged in getting my kids milkshakes and sitting down and trying to just figure out the process. There were chairs and stools stacked in the corners. It just it just didn't look fun. There was not a good energy. I mean, it was just, for lack of a better term, it just kind of sucked. And they tried very hard. So
my turn for the awkward interruption. I accidentally locked my girlfriend out of the apartment, so I'll be right back.
Okay, that's great. But anyway.
So Mike, this week, Wednesday, I believe the House is voting on the PPP extension, which I think is good news.
That's right. So I think most of our listeners probably been engaged in understanding where things are at with PPP. And the bigger thing is, and this goes to what IRC did with the White House last week, or maybe it was a week before, but talking about the fix to the PPP, and that would be some type of an extension past the 8 weeks, past the 8-week time period right now, and then perhaps allowing the 25% payroll utilities to be expanded into different percentages and maybe even allow for different uses. So it's our understanding that that's going to be voted on by the House, not the Senate, but the House on Wednesday. And it looks like it has bipartisan support. So we could be looking at some PPP fixes here very shortly.
And the good news from my standpoint is that watching the IRC speak with the president and his cabinet, was they seemed like those were pretty realistic asks.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, I mean, having watched the IRC and the NRA sitting down at the White House, I was very encouraged with the presentation and the ask. I thought that the ask was very reasonable, and the president and his cabinet members there also felt the same thing, that, okay, this is something we can do. And so to have the Congress engaged on that as well, it seems like, at one point, the president even said, boy, you guys are all asking for the same thing. Did you meet beforehand? Well, yeah, yes.
Hope so.
I would hope so. And clearly that was the case. So it appeared to me that everybody was in lockstep on one singular message of PPP, and that got through. So really.
And he also said it was the easiest, that's one of the easiest things that he's been asked. And so being optimistic based on that one interaction, hopefully we can see some progress on that. So
yeah, and that would help a lot of people. And part of the questions I do get is, so should I just hold on to my money right now and not do my third payroll or my fourth payroll? Nobody's probably in their fourth payroll yet. But should I just hold my money and hope this gets passed? My advice is always on that. You got to make the decision you feel most comfortable about. Nobody's got a crystal ball. It certainly appears at this point that there will be an extended period in which to use that money. So I think a calculated risk would be to hold that money if you want.
So speaking of regulations, I know something that's come up a lot on this show and that we've heard a lot of our industry colleagues ask about, and that is how, a lot of states have said that you can now sell wine and spirits to go if you're a restaurant, and everyone's wondering, how long will this last? How long will this last? And wondering what you're hearing, what your take is on that. And also, Dustin, I'd be curious to hear how you're viewing that as well. Somebody that's sort of playing in both arenas.
Yeah, the legislation update right now is in Colorado. And again, I'm in Colorado, so it's easy for me to pay attention to this stuff. But both New York and Colorado and Illinois are the 3 states I know about that have introduced legislation to make the ability for on-premise retail businesses to continue to sell off-premise alcohol. So just bottom line, your restaurants and bars selling alcohol to go used to be illegal in most states, and now under executive orders from the governors of those states is legal under certain circumstances. And In Colorado, we had legislation advanced, or I'd say drafted, and put forward for kind of comment, that would make it semi-permanent, which is annoying to me. Either do it or don't do it. But this would go in, make those changes permanent for 2 years. So it would self-destruct, essentially, self-expire on July of 2022. Same thing with New York. New York's would go in, essentially, same thing we're seeing would now be permanent until 2 years after the state of emergency has been lifted. So that could either be 2 years from July or 2 years from next January. Who knows? I like New York's wording better. I think I like, instead of just saying 2 years and have to revisit if we just live in this pandemic for the next year or so. New York's is a little bit more flexible, but that's not to talk about the policy or the economics of it. I have a lot of plenty of retail liquor stores that don't like this idea. I mean, Dustin, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of split, right? I love the restaurant industry. I come from the restaurant industry. I want to see them have the opportunity to do everything they can to survive through this. But I own a retail business, and the longer that we allow restaurants to sell retail, also, the more competitive the landscape becomes for a business like mine. So, my interests from a business standpoint are to not allow this to go on for any longer than it has to. I think it's for me, as if I look at it strictly from a business lens, as soon as the statute is lifted and that they're able to reopen their doors again, then I think this would, ideally in my situation, this would go away. This was a measure that was put into place to allow them to get some income while they're closed down. But once you're able to have diners in your restaurant again, maybe it's time for that to go away. Now, I think there's also room for maybe a little gray area in the middle, right? Like maybe there's some limitations on what how much wine or booze or whatever you can sell retail versus what you can consume dine in. Maybe there's a continuation of having to sell food to go along with it. Like if you order a meal, then you can add on a bottle of wine if you want to. For me, where it starts to, as a retailer, it starts to get tricky or look a little hairy is when, if you can go to any restaurant in the city and go pick up a couple cases of wine in the same way that you might pick up a couple cases of wine from me, your corner retail store. So, I want the restaurants to be able to do what they can to survive, but as a retail business owner, I'm not necessarily advocating for a long-term opening up of these rules. Kind of, even if it's 2 years, that's a long time.
Well, I think I'll be the neutral party here, and I haven't bought any wine from restaurants. I have bought cocktails from bars, and I've enjoyed that, of being able to get something that is different than I would normally be able to get at home, or being able to go to a wine shop or a liquor shop without having to purchase 4 or 5 different ingredients. So that's been a value add to it. But I also think from the restaurateur standpoint is that, when we do start to reopen, and speaking specifically to New York, it's not going to be at 100%. And so there's still a delta of revenue and profitability that we need to solve for in terms of being able to get everyone back up to 100% and how to weather this storm. And so I think, is there a way to make it a little more, adding some, like you said, some guidelines around it that could allow them to extend this for a little bit of time and make it a win-win on that, but know that it's not something that you're going to be creating a new business plan that says, hey, this is now a bunch of people trying to get into space and capitalize on this law, or are there people that are grandfathered in terms of their licenses in the short term, so that if I'm opening a restaurant tomorrow, that I'm not taking advantage of that. So people aren't trying to be unscrupulous and saying, oh, I'm going to just try and go in with this angle, sell a bag of potato chips and call myself a restaurant, and be able to then do a pop-up wine restaurant or pop-up wine shop.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's, I'd love to see maybe a little bit more tightening of the screws around, like, what does that mean? Are they just allowing restaurants to full on sell retail just like any other retailer would? because in the reality, you know, me as a retailer, we've spent money and resources and time and energy to kind of create our business the way it is within the original structure of how licensing was set up, right? So we can't just tomorrow flip on a switch and become a restaurant and start selling and serving food in the same way that a restaurant can flip a switch and start selling wine out the door. So, you know, there's kind of an unequal playing field there. Now, you know, I think coming to some maybe middle ground where you are ordering food, you have to order food to be able to take some of the wine, et cetera, and kind of really regulating that. And maybe the number of purchases that you can make, something along those lines, you know, is to me as a retailer in this business, less scary than saying like, hey, all 10,000 restaurants, or however many there are in New York City, you guys can all of a sudden now become retail stores too. That to me as a retail business owner is very scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, here in Colorado, and I think most states tightly regulate the off-premise trade, probably a little bit more than the on-premise. I mean, there's 25 restaurants, you know, on a given city block, perhaps, or in a small area. There might be one retail liquor store. So they're much more tightly regulated. In New York, you can have one per owner. Here in Colorado, you're just now allowed to have two per owner, but you know, they can't be within 1,500 feet of each other. You know, there's very tight regulations. If we were to now, you know, expand that and have restaurants, every restaurant can now sell to go in the same way as a retail liquor store, you've now just exponentially increased retail liquor sales, which goes against the rest of the liquor code, which says it's going to be, you know, it's going to be tightly controlled from that perspective. So now, you know, you have literally thousands and thousands coming online day one. The wholesalers are happy. You know, the consumers are probably a little bit more convenienced, but they're not used to living in that world of retail sales. And let's talk about trade practices. I mean, I don't want to get into this three-tier conversation, but you know, retailers live in a very strict supplier retailer trade practice world, and they understand it. Who's going to stock the shelves? Who's going to clean the floors? You know, how can I get this end cap of, you know, Yellowtail or whatever the case may be? You know, that while that also goes into restaurants, it's a different set of rules and it's a different mindset. So could be also kind of ripe for, I'm not going to say corruption, but you know, certainly ripe for some potential issues there. And that's both state and federal level.
And I view it though also as, if you're looking for a greater solution for the economy as a whole, and let's just say the food and beverage industry, this is a good thing if they can do it, because as we talk to people like Jasmine or different producers and hearing that, oh, most of my business is done on premise, and that has dried up. Well, if this is a way to get those craft distributors, those craft distillers or smaller wineries, to get them some cash flow and to slowly start the engine and get product moving through, I think that's a win. And you know, you don't really hear, granted it's a different scale, but you don't hear grocery stores saying, oh, I really hope they don't let restaurants get into this game. You know, they're not cannibalizing on their sales as much as, you know, the potential might be there on the wine side. But I do think it's showing, hey, they're doing that. And they're also helping farmers, especially the smaller farmers that may not have an outlet at grocery stores, by being able to have some representation, sell their product, get it to their guests with it. And I don't know, maybe, I think there are some similarities. It's not apples to apples, but
it's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's similar.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we already have so many states that allow some type of this. You know, again, here in Colorado, we have you can put a cork back in an unfinished bottle, put it in a bag, and take it to go. You know, if you just expanded that to, hey, you don't have to open it or partially consume it here. You can, you know, each meal can take a 750 of wine to go, or a 6-pack of beer, or, you know, one cocktail that's sealed in a special container, not just a Starbucks cup with tape over it. I would think that could be a little bit more palatable to retail liquor stores. That, okay, fine, we didn't lose a sale. That was a sale that was going to happen on premise anyway. I'm with Dustin. I certainly get where, okay, but when we're moving cases of wine, we get that you were in an emergency pandemic that first few months of that, and you just had to stay afloat, and nobody said a word about it. But now that we're talking about putting this into the real books and keeping it as a permanent thing, you can't be selling cases of wine to go, because now you are taking sales from us, as opposed to just selling what you would normally sell.
Yeah, and I think you have to think about it from a holistic point of view of like, okay, how does this regulation? It definitely helps restaurants, but then what are the consequences of that too? It can really hurt, retail.
Yeah.
So how do you find some middle ground such that these two worlds of retail, on premise and off premise, can continue to coexist? Nobody's going to end up hurting from this at the end of the day. Maybe loosen the restrictions to a certain extent, but not so much so that you're really going to crush one of these types of businesses. I think we've lived in a happy world together before. I think we can find that balance again, such that the restaurants can survive, and retailers aren't the ones paying the price for that.
Because there very well could be restaurants that open that when they open, they say, great, we're going to keep our same wine program. And then they start getting into it and realize, wow, what the guests are looking to drink has changed dramatically. And also, wow, we need cash flow. So then they go into the liquidation. I think you saw some restaurants doing that as a means to get cash flow with their existing inventory. That was a lever that they pulled to cover some of their expenses. That might be a lever that still needs to be pulled down the road by some restaurants as they start reopening. They said, oh, I don't need to do that. But then as they get into it and like, wow, the volume's not there, so I need more cash flow. I need to be able to sell that to go, or that could be a way of doing those wine sales. So I think until we're back at 100%, to be able to have some creativity with how a restaurant can use that to offset their expenses, I think it's a win. But I also agree, I don't think people should be pivoting their entire model to make it a wine shop with it. But we haven't really seen any drafting of regulations. It's more high level. Here's what we'd like to see. And then if we could start to add some more color and more parameters to that, I think it could be something that you could hone in on and make sure that it's being used for good, not for evil.
Yeah, I think there are small towns, and I can think of a few even here, resort towns in Colorado, where this would probably kill a retail liquor store in a small town, just because you could just go to the restaurant and get it, and tourists coming in might not even, sometimes retail liquor stores just aren't highly visible. They're unattractive standalone buildings sometimes that just have a big red sign that says liquor. And so, I could see that killing those types of establishments. But it's all right now. I completely agree. This is get sales to continue to move, give restaurants a lifeline. I mean, I think that's really what this was. So some type of a longer temporary solution. I think we're going to see it. From what I understand, the Illinois legislation is going to the governor maybe as we speak. So I'll pay attention to that and see if that actually is signed in and what actually happens there. But this is the world we're living in right now.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see, where the details end up falling with this. I've been seeing a few photos online, articles that are coming out where some restaurants are currently restructuring and putting shelving, putting their cellar shelving out in the dining room, and they've turned their restaurant into a stand-up retail store. To me, I'm like, that's great right now, that's awesome, but in the long term, obviously, I'm not interested in that happening with every restaurant in New York City. It would destroy our business. So again, I think it's going to end up boiling down to yes, let's loosen some of these restrictions, but let's make sure that everybody gets to still play in the sandbox together and play nice.
Great. It's also, I think, too early to tell, is this a trend or a fad, just in terms of where guests will go for their wine, et cetera. I mean,
yeah, I think, Dustin, you're going to talk about this, but also it goes into pricing. I would think as a consumer, I'm used to paying high prices for alcohol at a restaurant, but why would I go to a restaurant and pay higher prices for a bottle when I could just go down to the retail liquor store and buy it for less?
Yeah, and I think some restaurants I've seen that are adjusting their pricing so that it's more in line with retail, so that they can be competitive on that end. Or they've at least discounted it heavily from their normal wine list pricing. I also think, as kind of nitpicky as we are in retail about pricing, the average customer, I don't think, unless you're pretty wine savvy and you're looking for specific things, most people aren't super aware of what wine prices should be. So, most people walk into a store and say, hey, I've got $20 to spend on a nice bottle of red. find something for me that's $20. They don't know if the guy down the street is selling it for 15 or the other person up the road even further is selling it for 30.
Yeah.
You know, it's neither here nor there to most people, unless you're like, you know, kind of wine professionals or into wine. So, you know, I think there is definitely still room for restaurants to play in that space, and, you know, and make some money from it in the meantime.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about earlier, I was in San Diego. I wish. South Dakota, San Diego, and the restaurants were opening. Dustin, as the restaurants are reopening in New York, I mean, I know that's where you guys are at. What are you guys seeing with this?
So I think it was interesting this past week, or the week and a half before, I saw more restaurants starting to reopen, and not necessarily open their front doors, but do it from a takeout standpoint. And I'm not sure what the catalyst was for it or why now, but it was interesting. I saw that a lot of them going back to the exact same model that they were before. And I personally think that's the wrong move, where it's saying, we're just going to open up and we're going to put our menu online and we're going to put it on Caviar, DoorDash, Grubhub, whatever those are. Yeah. And we're going to open for quote unquote, a la carte takeout, or a la carte delivery service. And in my mind, it's really missing the moment and the opportunity. And the moment being, what are our guests looking for right now? And to be honest, I looked at a restaurant open. I'm going to go order, maybe see what they have on the menu. And I went and I saw it, and I haven't been in a restaurant in 3 months, but seeing a $25, $35 appetizer on the menu, and seeing, you know, whether pizza for 25 or 30 bucks for a Neapolitan style pizza, I was like, wow, I'm thinking about what I've been able to eat at home, drink at home. And I could see it before when I was going into a restaurant and I was getting the atmosphere, the service and such, but having it come to my house in plastic containers that I then have to replate at that same value, it was sort of, the value was lost in translation in my mind as we were looking at it. Yeah. What have you seen, Dustin? Have you?
Not much. I don't know if I'm just in a different neighborhood, so we're, you know, we have access to less up here, but you know, for us, it's been the same couple of places that we can normally get takeout from. We've continued to do that. And I haven't seen anybody in my immediate area reopening just yet. I have seen some bars close by starting to serve cocktails to go, some people hanging out on the streets, things like that, but haven't really noticed much in the way of kind of official reopening, or, you know, some of the more formal sit-down places in my area opening up for takeout. You know, so I think at least in my area, we're still a little ways out from that.
But that's an opportunity, I think, where in the past, people have in New York, I'm speaking specifically to New York and our environment here, where you'd have people coming from all over the city to dine at a restaurant. It was like destination dining, where I'll get on the subway, I'll take an Uber, and I'll go check out that restaurant. And now, without that, people being more reluctant to travel, even though that you can go outside, that they're not going to be traveling as far to eat. And in that case, it's also an opportunity for the restaurant to say, how could I actually make this more enticing for my neighbors in my community? And if you could lower the price a little bit, is there a way to introduce it to them? And this isn't a set it and forget it model where it's saying, hey, this is what we're going to be for the future. Everyone, I think, is under the impression and the realization that, hey, this is an interesting time. People are trying things. So let's deviate from our old business model. And I think you're missing out on an opportunity to do that, not to mention the profitability of it, because if you're just opening with your old a la carte menu, you're bringing in all the inefficiencies from before that you had on the delivery. Yeah. And now if you're paying 25% commission to have it delivered, well, before takeout was just gravy on top of everything. But now if that's your sole revenue stream, you're actually basically building in the same, that 25% would be the same as if you had front of house staff that you were paying as well. And your profitability is probably even reduced.
And probably doing a fraction of the sales. Yeah, I think it's time to kind of take a look at your menu mix, sales mix, and say, okay, what are my top performers? What does everybody come here, and what do they normally order? That's going to be what your people in your neighborhood probably are most looking
Yeah.
forward to, the specific dish, this roast chicken from here, or the pasta dish from this place, or whatever the case may be. Lean into that, say, okay, cool, we're gonna pick our top 5, our top 4, or whatever, put it out there, make it really easy, add it to the fabric of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead. I was going to say, to me, there's a couple of points I wanted to jump in on, but one of which is, at what point, I think we've had the novelty phase of this, the Zoom 5 p.m. calls with cocktail hours, and and maybe getting a takeout meal or a meal kit from a place that you never could have done that before. And some restaurants have had success with that. But as a consumer, at what point do I think I'm bored of it already, where the novelty's gone. Okay. I mean, we're really in for the long haul here. And now things are starting to open back up. How are you going to appeal to me in a
Right.
way forward that's going to become permanent part of what I do? And I don't have the answer to that question, but I want someone to give me an answer and say, look, your Friday night pizza that you've been doing since you were a kid, that's standard. Take out Chinese food, that's a standard you've done for your whole life. Maybe a burger. Here's a new one. Who's going to have that new one? That's a standard for the next 20 years that my kids beg for, or that I just look for as a comfort food. I'm looking for that as the takeout delivery option.
And I think if you look at and if you look even in the on-premise in restaurants, anytime we've come into a recession or been operating in recession, people go back to comfort food. And I think this is one of those times. And if you can come up with what is your version of the roast chicken, what is your lasagna, whatever those are that are the heartwarming things, it's not a direct competition to what's happening in your restaurant, because your restaurant doesn't exist. Yep. And so how can you actually use this to build a new following, build the trust with the guests? And hey, you know what? If at the end of this, one of those kits or one of that comfort food actually becomes viable as its own business stream, or something you can just plug into your existing model, I think that's a win. But
agreed,
now's the time to be trying it.
Yeah, and one of the more inspiring things that I saw actually was Noma reopening to just doing burgers and wine and opening it up to everybody. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was interesting about that, what I thought was really smart about that was a place like Noma that's so internationally recognized, that tends to get a lot of international guests, a really difficult reservation, is saying, you know what, let's forget about like being this global restaurant for a second. Let's just take care of our area, our neighborhood, our city, and allow a ton of people to come here and enjoy this experience, make it really straightforward, really easy, and doing nothing but cheeseburgers or hamburgers and wine. And I think that that's brilliant. And then, I think, to your point, Mike, there's a kind of a novelty of saying like, okay, yeah, it's been really fun to eat at this restaurant to go, or this restaurant to go, places that maybe you couldn't get into before, that had, it was a harder reservation to get. There's a excitement and novelty to maybe getting that order the first couple of times. But then after a bit, you're like, okay, these are more expensive. I can't really do this on a nightly basis. You get it, and maybe the experience is awesome. Maybe it's not as awesome as what you thought it was going to be. But I do think there's going to be a level of fatigue that people start feeling with those, where they'd much rather revert back, just get their normal stuff, spend a little less money, the things that make them happy, and a little easier that they can do on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also when you look at it though, if you're just taking your old menu and the traditional model of to-go or delivery, saying, hey, we're just gonna offer our same menu. With it, before you wrote your business plan, and your model was based on, I can do a certain number of covers because I have this number of seats in a window from 6 to 9 p.m. And you had to price things accordingly to offset all of your labor with this. Now you have a completely different labor model, and you're not capped by seats. You have much more opportunity to do volume and do throughput. And if you just stick it at the same prices, I think you're missing out at that opportunity. And this is not something that is going to be just, it's going to be until we open at 50%. Well, at 50% capacity, you're still going to have additional capacity that you can do outside that. So why not use yours as a ghost kitchen in addition to being a full service restaurant, and taking that mentality where, free yourself of that. And there was one restaurant in DC that I heard about where the owner went to the managers and said, I want you each to come up with your own concept that you'd like to run out here, and I will help fund it. And basically turning it into almost like an incubator of new ideas for his team to practice. It's not competing or taking away from his brand of whatever that restaurant is. It's actually, in my mind, trying things, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what works, and helping his team think about it in a completely different manner rather than go back to that broken model. And everyone's saying, oh, the restaurant industry is broken and we're trying to save these concepts that are struggling. Well, then why are we going right back to it in the traditional model with it?
Yeah. And another point I make is, you have so much choice now, certainly for delivery and takeout. It may not seem like that, but I think we do. And now I have to pick the restaurant, and then I have to go into a menu and look through all of these choices. And I don't even know, all I hear about in the news is how we can't get good meat, and all the farmers are going out of business. And so you're expecting me to look at a menu that existed in January of 2020 and believe that you have the same ingredients available to you now that were available then, and then order it at the same price or more. I don't think I'm going to have that kind of trust. I think we have to build a new loyalty to say, hey, look, here are the 3 dinner options this week, and take the choice away. If I ask my kids, what do you want for dinner? We're never going to eat dinner. If I say you can have a cheeseburger or you can have a hot dog, they're going to pick one. And so I'm okay to have a restaurant that I trust is doing the right thing and providing a product for me that I value, and say, hey, on Wednesday, it's going to be the chicken or it's going to be the fish. Oh, that sounds good. I'll try the chicken. What's wrong with that? Like, I know you're going to kill that chicken. Maybe I didn't want it, but now I do. I prepay for it. You know how much to order, and I come and pick it up.
Well, you bring up a good point.
I was going to say it's an interesting balancing act, right, that the restaurants have to strike between trying to maintain their brand and the experience that they've created over however long they've existed, while at the same time, for maybe the first time in a while, really listening to what the market is asking for, right? Like a lot of restaurants are a creative outlet for chefs or sommeliers or the people in the industry to kind of show their stuff, right? The chef's ability to kind of create certain dishes or certain type of cuisine, and you come to the restaurant to kind of be transported and experience that. Where now you don't have that same ability, right? You're feeding people outside of the restaurant, so you have to be much more attuned, I think, to what customers are looking for, what they want, listening to the market, rather than saying like, this is my statement and this is what I want to create, and you come to me. It has to be kind of more, what are you looking for? World, what can I provide to you? What do we have the skill set to be able to provide that you're looking for? And it's a different mentality, right? But then, taking that mentality and striking a balance with, the brand that you've created, because you don't want to just go down the wrong path of, doing something completely different than what you're used to doing. But how do you find that balance of like making the market happy while also trying to maintain your brand? And it's an interesting, time.
But that also, and then creating new loyalty. You have a loyalty that existed pre-COVID, and now that's been shaken, not due to any fault of your own, most likely, but now it's a chance to build new loyalty with your existing customers, and then new customers under this, who will have new loyalty to your restaurant or any business, frankly, after the fact. It's going to be something new. But like the restaurant I told you guys I went into, a new customer, but I think they were trying, but I just didn't really feel great about it. I'll never go back, even if I'm up there. Here, I want to go in somewhere, either dining as of today here in Colorado, or takeout, and have this product that you're telling me this is safe and this is great product. It's different than it was in February, but it's great. It's on the same level. Enjoy this experience. And then I say, wow, they're going, they're teaching me how to eat and how to dine in this new experience. And I'm going to believe them, and I'm going to be loyal to them going forward.
And I would argue, to the brand standpoint, I would argue that if you're a fine dining restaurant trying to get into the delivery game now, and you're just taking what you had on your menu and putting it in play, you're actually doing more harm to your brand than you are good, because the value proposition does not equal out. When guests are paying $35 for that entree, and I've got my fish that's been steaming in the plastic container, like, your menu is designed, or has been designed, to show well in a controlled environment. Once you
Right.
step outside of that, there's a
Yeah.
lot more variables in somebody's backpack as they're biking across the city, being shaken up and jostled. It's being cooked, and then it's 45 minutes later it's being consumed. There's so many things that degrade the experience, but yet you still have the expectation. I just paid this much, and the value proposition doesn't come in. I think as restaurateurs, we're in the mindset: how do we over deliver? And this is an amazing opportunity to over deliver, reset and recalibrate those expectations. And I think one of the first things is looking at the price. Here's what I'm paying when I click buy on that website, and I have an expectation right then. When it shows up and I see it, that's when I can be like, wow. And I think there's so much more of an opportunity to do it. Not to mention, as you were saying, in terms of the profitability standpoint, if I have a whole menu and I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs waiting to see what orders are coming in tonight, I have all that inventory on hand, and a lot of it could go bad. But to your point, Mike, if there's a way of ordering in advance, and you know what you're going to sell, you know what to purchase, you know how many people you need to staff for, you set yourself up for success. Maybe you build in, so it is that set menu. Maybe it's, a set kit that we've talked about, and you sell those kits, and each week there's a different kit, and it's the same price. Guests know that there's value in whatever that price is per person. Then you know how many to prepare, and maybe you keep a couple extra back, and you build it first of all so people have to come pick it up, and you see how much of momentum you can get from that. So you're taking out the delivery fee, and you know when they're coming. And then if you want to start to ramp up the quantity of it after you've sold out, well, do you put another 10% over, and then you put that on a Caviar or on a Grubhub or whatever at a higher price, so that's not eroding your margins, and you can give guests the option: come pick it up and it's this price, or you will deliver it to you and it's this price, but it's not going to impact our margins. You're actually paying a convenience on it. And that's a different mentality that I don't think we've seen enough prior to this, but now's the time to be trying that and thinking outside the box on what's going to be sustainable for your business in the long term.
Yeah, and being honest with the consumer. If I go to a website and it says, order this and $10, if you want it delivered, it's a $10 fee. Just tell me. I'll make my decision. I can come pick it up, or I can have it delivered. It's the hidden fees where I put it in my cart, and all of a sudden dinner for $5 has like $80 in delivery charges, taxes, surcharges, whatever the fees are. No, I don't want that. Just tell me up front. I mean, let me make the decision. Frankly, I'd appreciate it and appreciate that honesty and communication.
That's where I think now's the time everyone's talking about how hard it was with the delivery companies before. Well, again, why are you just playing right into that? Why not put it out there and try and, control your costs? And if we always said the cost structure didn't work in restaurants, it was so challenging, why are we just going to inherit them and plug and play as we try and, limp out of this?
Yeah, and
I think.
Go ahead, Dustin.
Oh, I was going to say, I think for me, the company that I've been watching that I feel like is just doing a tremendous job at pivoting and working through this whole catastrophe is the Alinea Group up in Chicago. I mean, these guys, I think, just hit the nail on the head in every way. And they're
then invented new
from what I
nails
understand,
to hit on the head.
Yeah, from what I understand, are doing really well with it. To be able to order from Alinea for, call it, let's $40 or $45 or whatever it is for a meal from them. And they're just selling it like hotcakes. And I know that they've structured it so that you come pick it up. I don't think they're even offering delivery. I'm sure they've created their margin structure to be in such a way that it works really well for the restaurant. They've staffed appropriately. I think if anybody should be, looking for how to do this right, I think those guys are really, really on it.
And it's new. They're not doing the old thing through takeout or delivery. It's a new experience through takeout delivery. Yeah. Something Sabto keeps saying, which I think is an important word. He keeps saying old, the old way, the old menu, the old this. That old is not good. Old, gone, new. You're either kicking it. Well, whatever. I won't even say that. But nonetheless, we got to be moving forward, right? And I think the idea
cut costs, not corners, Mike.
Cut costs, not corners. That's right. That's what I'm telling everybody this week. That's right. But Jill up in Aspen, she just sent a nice quote or a nice statement. She's opening tonight, and she's an Italian restaurant, one of the best in the state, and she's going to be selling tacos to go, and people are going to love them. She's going to kill it, and that's great. It's something new. It's not an old menu thing. It's a new thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. People will be excited about it. And so I think doing something new well, and again, that goes back to loyalty. I mean, with the Alinea group, same thing. Like it's a new loyalty to new customers.
Yeah.
And the old customers are coming back. Well, there's that word again. You know, your standard, your constant customers are going to come back for a new experience, and then for for an experience they desire to have again. Think forward on this. In the pricing too. I just want to go back to this. I know we're going to move on, but the pricing, we're so used to paying $20 for a pizza or $20 for Chinese food takeout. You can't just throw a $70 per person meal in front of me and say, come get it. I just, maybe you can, maybe I'm dumb, but I don't see it. I'm not going to go buy
Look at the unemployment numbers, and especially
come on.
What a lot of the energy and gratification we have is taking care of people in our industry. And when you look at how many people are unemployed in our industry and putting something out there like this, you're missing one of the audience, the champions, the people that dine out most frequently. And how do you make something accessible to them? And it's not just them, it's everybody. And this is going to become even more of an issue when we open our doors for full service, for dining. And if you're going in with that same model.
And
I think there's an element of, you got to kind of swallow your pride a little bit, take the ego out of it and say, okay, how do I make this the best for my business and the best experience that the customers are going to appreciate? And sometimes, what you want to do in your heart, the fancy, cool, creative things that you want to do, while all that was fine a couple of months ago, is not necessarily what people need or want right now. So there is an element of kind of saying, like, taking a step back and removing yourself, your ego from the situation, and create something that's of real value for the paying customers out there.
And I'll wrap this up with one quote from Pulp Fiction, because there's so many life lessons in that movie. But there's that scene when Marcellus Wallace is sitting there talking to Butch, who's Bruce Willis' character, and he says, in the bottom of the eighth, you're going to feel a sting in the back of your head. You know what that is? That's pride fucking with you. Fuck pride. Because when you're sitting there on the island sipping a pina colada, you're going to say, you know what? Marcellus Wallace was right. And it's one of those things where it's like, how do you get through this so you can be sipping pina coladas at the end of it? Because
that's right.
Right now, that is to go back and just, again, be a martyr, not the right move to do if you want to be in this industry and make a difference and help it evolve, because we all need to evolve. And looking at other inspiring models and applying those and tinkering, whether it's a taco stand or whether it's Canlis Brothers doing burger joints and bagels out in Seattle, there's ways to adapt it, and that's fun.
Yeah, it's the restaurant business. It's business. You got to. The passion is great, and that gets you there. But man, you got to run a business, and so the providing value to the customers, so they want to come back. If you're going to charge more, fine. Bottles of wine to go, those types of things, great. But just to throw a price tag on it because it's your name, I don't respond well to that. But that, we've been talking a lot about takeout, but now, we're reopening. Things are reopening here in Colorado. We're reopening today. The guidelines are out, 50% capacity. And Sabto, when you look at the reduced capacity guidelines, and I know we've talked a lot about this, but here we are, we're right here. We're about to jump off the cliff. How are you as a CEO of a company going to make this work with reduced capacity?
What's unfortunate is I think it's similar to the takeout thing, and I'm not seeing anything that's innovative or best practices coming out of it. So again, you're opening with what we've all agreed and said, we need help as an industry. We have broken models, and we're putting those models back into play. And you can't just look at 50% occupancy and say that translates to 50% revenue, because it doesn't. It's you're losing lunch business. That's not profitable before. Now, if you're at 50% capacity at lunch, it's going to be even more of a drag. You're losing your PDR business. You're also losing any bar business of people waiting for a table or being able to sit at a bar and eat and dine. So that in itself weights down and increases the burden on a restaurant when you open. So if you're not doing anything to offset that or thinking about how to counterbalance those, I think you're fighting a losing battle. And not to mention, at 50% capacity, when you're booking reservations, it's a whole different mindset, because a four top with one seat missing, that's losing out on 25% of the opportunity of that one seating. And you need to really look at that stakes have gone up even greater now for every no-show that you have, because you don't have a way to backfill it, and it's amplified. So I think, again, with this, you need to look to say, how can I minimize my costs, my exposure there? How can I get consistency? And how can I streamline my operating costs? And if the economics didn't work at 100%, why are we going back to it?
Now, Sabato, something, and Dustin, this kind of brings into the Alinea group idea is, can you get to a comfort level where you are doing reservation only and even maybe pre-sale only? And I bring up the Alinea group because I think, I'm not going to say they invented that, but it seems like they certainly perfected over the past few years, where you buy a ticket, you're in or you're out, don't show up, we don't care. I mean, we want you there, but we've got your money. And so it's destination, it's appointment dining. You know, one of the regulations here in Colorado, and I know in other states, is reservations highly encouraged, which really means take reservations. The pre-sale, how do you think that might calculate into this?
I think it's definitely something you need to, that's guaranteed revenue. You can't afford to have a no-show. And I think by doing that, you can, I would also say, in addition to that, how do you streamline your menu into some sort of limited prefix? You have to maximize your revenue. So you get the cash and secure the seat by the ticketed sale. I think that's great. Also looking at it and saying, you know what, maybe we only sell 2 tops and 4 tops for a week out or 2 weeks out. Then if you want a 3 top, we can add you to the wait list and then put that in there rather than have an empty seat that we're actually losing potential revenue on. It's a perishable item, that seat is. And I think looking at how you lay out your dining room, because you're gonna have to take tables out. What are the smartest tables to take out that will then give you the most versatility in terms of how you can seat people? 2 tops, pulling them all together, if you need a 4 top. But I think you have to look at it through, I'm building a dining room that, how do I do that to maximize my throughput? And that in turn will help maximize revenues.
Salvador, how do you see that though, from the point of view as I think doing the pre-sale ticketed things, reservation only, is easy for a certain class of restaurant, right? But I do still think that kind of your more casual, everyday walk-in type restaurants, it's a little trickier to do. You know, if you're looking at a more casual space, how do you still maximize that 50% with, you know, kind of maintaining the kind of the vibe and the atmosphere that you had before?
Well, I think, you know, it's how do you, it's streamlining the entire process. And so just on the ticketing piece, you could also do it where it's almost like a down payment for it. You know, hey, this secures your reservation. So the first step is, how do you minimize the number of no-shows? Because that's always been an issue in the industry. You can't afford that. It's going to hurt even more now. So whether it's, hey, here's a fee for this table, and if not, we have to charge you for it, or it's, here's a, you know, $15 per person. This will go towards your check when you dine. There's ways around that, but you need to make sure that every seat is full to the best of your ability. Then once you're in there, it's saying, I can't afford to have a 2-hour turn time on my dinner. So how can I actually reduce that? Because I think guests are going to want it. You're not going to be able to have people just waiting and then put them right in there. So you need to condense it. And I think, Mike, it's kind of tying back to what you experienced. When you're in a crowded place now for the first time, you hear somebody cough across the room, your mind starts racing. You hear somebody sneeze. It's like, after a while, that builds anxiety, and that's not fun as a diner. So how do you streamline it so that you can actually get the guests in and out quicker, which is a win for them? Maybe it also, you can do it at a more affordable price point. So instead of having a, you know, a la carte menu, and you have some items that are profitable, some that aren't as profitable on the menu, and you know, you hope that the menu mix works and increase your profitability. Well, if you could actually shorten it down to maybe a set 3-course where it's a choice of 3 apps, 3 entrees that check all the boxes, then you can put that out much quicker, and you can reduce those turn times. Or even, is it, you know, in like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, you go and you have a, you know, Michelin 3-star sushi experience at a counter, but you know that it's only going to last 30 minutes. And maybe not to that extreme, but give guests an explanation up front. Hey, it's going to take you an hour and a half to dine with us, but we're also going to need that table back so at 8 o'clock, so that we can then clean it, sanitize it, and get it ready for the next guest. And that's our commitment to you from a safety standpoint. We can't have people just running around trying to flip the dining room as quickly, because that's what's going to get people huffing and puffing, rubbing up against each other, all the things that we're trying to avoid in it. So there's a way to do it for the guest and for the business.
Yeah, and you know, something interesting on that, as far as a guest experience, when I was at that restaurant and the table got up and left, they came over and sprayed the table. And I couldn't help but think to myself, where's all that spray going? You know, spray goes into the air and it's not just directly hitting that table, it's going everywhere. You know, what kind of chemicals are those? Is that Windex? Is that, you know, what is that? I have no idea. And I can only imagine sitting in a nice restaurant and having them spray a table right next to me. Am I going to smell those chemicals over my bottle of wine? Am I going to, you know, or do you
Are those chemicals going to end up on your food or something?
Yeah. And are they in the gloves? Is it in the apron? Is it this, that, or the other? I mean, it goes back to the whole point of the whole thing's just anxious, and I just as soon not do it. So the restaurant that shows me this new experience of, wow, they really got it. I didn't even know that was a thing, but now they're doing it. Now I've come to expect it. That's going to be the restaurant that wins and teaches me, you know, the new kind of dining in this scenario. It's that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think, you know, with that, you know, things like whether it be steps of service, you know, people aren't going to want you coming and marking. There's almost like you'll twitch every time somebody comes over and says on your right, or trying to clear something. So the less you have to intervene at the table, the better. And even something as simple as marking, I'd feel much more comfortable if I get a roll up and I've got my silverware for the next 3 courses right there, and I don't have to have somebody coming in and dropping it and on each side of me. And think about how many trips to the table a server has to take that starts invading people's personal space, which is even the barriers and awareness is even heightened now. So pre-setting wine glasses, all those things that can make it more hands-off is actually in the guest's favor now, not as a way of perceived of, oh, they're just trying to cut corners.
Right, leaving the wine bottle on the table. I think that's something I've been thinking about is, you know, do you want the sommelier coming over and grabbing your bottle, touching it, leaning over your shoulder, pouring over everybody at the table? Probably not. I think good wine service now is going to be like, I'm going to properly open your bottles, make sure it's sanitized, put it on the table for you, and it's yours. Enjoy. Pour it yourselves.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about with the cleaning, I mean, the other point would be, do you want guests seeing how you clean up their particular table as they get up and leave, and now that the hazmat suits come in and say, this was a really dirty table? I mean, do you want somebody to see you like wiping down their chair, or do you want your guests to see you wiping down their chairs and wiping down their table? So do you have to give like a 5-minute period for them to leave the restaurant, so they're not offended by the sight of you cleaning up so intensely after them, even though we all know why they're doing it?
But we've also all been in restaurants and you've had to flip that table that just had the kid at the 6 o'clock seating that crushed all the Cheerios, and they're all over the table and they're all on the carpet. And then you basically have to get in there and you have to do a full on, deep clean of that entire space.
Yeah.
And how long that takes. That is now sort of the time you need to allot for. That's the standard now for every table.
Yeah.
And I do think the more streamlined and the more efficient you can be in it, so it almost looks like a ballet when you go in, and you also get the heightened level of cleanliness, that's going to set guests at ease with it. But it's not something you can just say, okay, guys, go ahead and flip the table like you did before, except we're going to do X, Y, Z. Figure out how to do that and train your team on it.
Yeah, cleanliness and sanitation is going to be the new high level of service.
And I think explaining it.
You want your guests seeing it. Yeah,
absolutely. It's the visual cues. Yeah. Before you would hide the cleaning crew. Go to a hotel and you never be seen. Now I want to see you. I need to see you in the hallways, and I need the cleaning crew must be there during the day, and I want to see the hazmat suits, and I want to see the cleaners, because it shows me you're doing something. Yeah. So it's definitely it's turning it on its head.
But the moral of the story is just, I think it's a wasted opportunity, and I don't think it's the right move for people to go into, whether it's the delivery game or into the restricted capacity game with the exact same model we had before. You're not setting yourself up for success in the long term, and you're not helping us as an industry move forward and leaving some of those inefficient practices behind. So,
well, good. We're just about out of time, and quiet crew today. Not a lot of questions, but that's okay. There's going to be a ton of questions because we got a great show next week. But in the meantime, we'll just ask you guys some questions. Oh yeah, that's right. Dustin, what restaurant do you want to go eat at the most? Sit down, full experience when this is all over.
Oh gosh.
Come on. I
mean, probably my little taco place around the corner, El Mitote. I look forward to getting a margarita and crushing some tacos there. That's going to be my spot.
Or you can go to Alina in Aspen and you can get tacos there tonight.
If I was in Aspen, that's where I would be today.
That's exactly where I'd be. Do you deliver down to Boulder, Joe? Sabato, what about you?
Wow, it's a good question. I'd say two that come to mind. One would be specific, and Zuni Cafe, just in terms of a restaurant that I think it gives you that hug when you walk in and you look on the menu, and they're not afraid to serve a damn good roast chicken. And that's something that I think is very comforting. And I always find value on their wine list. And I think being able to have value in those times really, really matters. So I'd put that one on there. And then something that, you know, haven't been able to cook at home, sushi. I'm not really gonna discriminate where it is, but a place that has great sushi with people, you know, making it right there in front of you, and a small counter is something that I look forward to dining at.
Very good.
All
right, guys.
Any words of wisdom for people listening?
Yeah, words of wisdom. Cut
Right behind
costs,
you there.
not corners. That's right. That's there, and that's not leaving. Cut costs, not corners. Live by that. You can do it. You can do it well. Just you know, build that loyalty. Keep your base understanding you're doing everything you can. So, all right, Dustin, take us out.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Tune in next week. We have James Beard Award winner, Chef JJ Johnson, who is the chef and owner of Field Trip in Harlem, joining us for next week. So really looking forward to that. Thanks for everybody that joined. You will be able to watch this at any time. We'll have it archived on our YouTube site. We're also going to get this up on a podcast in the near future. So please like this episode, share this with your friends, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, get your friends to subscribe, and we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Can't wait for next week.